Hey everyone, today we're gonna do a quick team war review. Probably gonna take us around 30 minutes because the game is really short, 6 minutes. It's been requested from one of the teams I'm coaching for, and with that team, if any of you guys, when you're gonna watch that video, remember our previous notes, what we talked about, how you need to synchronize the pressure, how it's important for us to fight in the same space and just take advantage of your resources, see what those are allowing you to do on the map. And currently here, if we do a quick breakdown, we got dive, poke composition, dive, poke hybrid, but mostly this is mostly about the dive, in my opinion, because there's a lot of verticality. You gotta control that top left and top right on the Noom Bunny, really important spots, and your Ash, meanwhile, will be taking advantage of that by positioning the mid-range and low-range sidelines. Your Life Fever here, I think, will mainly focus on just trying to pull somebody out when the dive is not successful, or maybe your Ash is getting pressured, and that's about it. I think there could be maybe even better, more valuable, big potential from the Life Fever. Instead of playing that character, we could be playing something else as well. But it's all doable. Maybe it's your comfort pick, so it's understandable. Taking advantage of your mobility. You guys pretty mobile besides the Ash, so let's just get started. I think two main topics are gonna be for us how you guys use resources and how do you fight for important positions or power positions. I like to say power positions, it's this high ground to the left side and this high ground to the right side, because it's allowing you to control most of the objective over here. Now, when we talking about your resources, the most important to brush around is your bubble. So if you use in your bubble, there has to be a big reason. If we keep it simple, when the bubble is used, there has to be Ash pressure, there has to be Genji dash, and just his shotgun kind of going for the really close range pressure angle, and your Mercy should be able to damage boost that. So if you notice, maybe this sort of stuff is happening, I don't think it's too ideal because there's a downtime with your dive, right? Right when the bubble is used, you cannot perform the active actions. Your Genji is diving in, maybe there is somebody else who wants to just go for, you cannot support that too actively. And we can see probably here we have it on cooldown, and now that's why we get melted, and that's why for you Genji it's also going to be complicated to dive in. So what I suggest when you're fighting for those power positions, try to synchronize your pressure a little bit more. Usually, because you guys playing as a team, I recommend trying to do 3-2-1 call and just engage, going on the same target. Try to choose the weakest link on the enemy team. Ideally, we should be able to do some sort of scouting before. One of the best targets here, that probably would be that Ana separated on the point because they're too isolated, or those could also be the Zenyatta and the Hanzo, but you have to call for it and you have to sync. 3, 2, 1, use the bubble, Genji goes in, damage boost happens, and your Ash probably will be on that angle over here. Let's call it angle A, while you guys are pressuring that area down there, or you pressure the Ana. But now, because the pressure is desynced when we used the bubble before, it's really difficult. And you will see a lot of times how you playing the dive is going to be important to synchronize the pressure. Now, another thing, when you're fighting for those power positions, this top right and this top left, you as a dive, it's more important to use the verticality. It's more important to take advantage of the mobility. So we typically cannot be stuck somewhere in the rooms. We cannot be fighting in enclosed spaces, because if something goes wrong, if we get pressured, then we cannot jump away because there's the ceilings, there are a lot of walls, we cannot take advantage of our mobility. Where here, you can be anywhere. You can provide that indirect threat towards an enemy, even though you playing Winston or you playing Genji over here. You can jump over there, or you can jump over here, or you can just go towards the point, and all of that just does a lot. Just keep that in mind. Indirect pressure. It forces an enemy to do something. But now there's only one choice for them to fight this, and it's not in your favor too, because there's a big potential if the maze fighting you here to also get rolled off and just get pressured. They have stronger frontline pressure here. So this bubble, and we can also break it down to the lens of the timing, is that the most ideal to us, right? Can we see that there's Ashe angle? I don't think so. Well, Genji kind of taking advantage of that, and maybe the Mercy, but not live here as well. We really would love to see that, but it's only possible when you're fighting for those high grounds from here. Typically, looking for the dive from here to here, it's not that your dive before was wrong, it's just the execution. We need to make sure we synchronize the pressure in one place. I really love that angle over here. This is what we exactly gonna be looking for, setting up as soon as possible, but the rest of you guys have to be synced, yeah? When the bubble is used, I want all of that happening together. That's why maybe have someone just shot calling saying, okay, when we going in, Sweet One engaging, yeah? Usually it's gonna be the Winston. You can start with that call, or you can push even deeper, just try to think, what is that target we're diving in, and quickly just say, okay, are you ready to dive? Let's go. Let's dive it. Maybe you can even ignore Sweet One call, but while you can start with Sweet One, in my opinion, because this way it gives you more time, and instead of rushing things, you will take it slow, but you'll do it good. You'll be in the same page instead of just being all separate, being in different places and not gonna be able to dive in. And we'll see here the pressure is again distinct and also non-comfortable sidelines for us to be at. This is where we typically would try to fight as a more of a brawl team. We like more enclosed spaces, but you guys running more dive and poke options, so we definitely cannot be inside those buildings too much. Let's move forward a little bit. And as usual, if you guys gonna have any questions, you can always message me. You can leave the comment on YouTube as well. Take advantage of that too. There's no problem. I will answer all the questions. Now let's break down disengagements. What do we see? Now, how we using the space is looking good. It's just we trying to fight for this powerful position and generally speaking taking advantage of verticality, but the rest of the team, are they ready though? Are they ready to complement what are you doing? And I don't think so. So what can be the solutions before the dive this way? Yeah, before you going in. Well, first off, you can set up. Second, you can communicate with your team, try to scout the target. What are we going for? What is the best option for us? What are we gonna do the next time? And if we're talking about this Winston specifically, how is the best for you to set up a lot of times is try to make sure the dive is happening from not too long sideline. You will see here, this is dive from point 1 towards the point 2. There's a long sideline which could be solved if we are, instead of doing this dive, going in for this position 1.1 inside the building, and suddenly there's a last distance towards that position too, because you able to use cover really well and you just getting in as soon as possible. Yeah, so what is that about? Why we have to do that? Because we're not gonna take a lot of poke. We again easily ignore that space, but don't hesitate to set up with your jump. Do not hesitate to even jump from here to here, get the corner, and afterwards you can always try to establish the dive. This is going to be more scary for the enemy team as well. You can use verticality and get as close to the enemy as possible, and see that entire time where we took the most damage, it was right in the air. Why? Because this more linear jump, and so make sure try to get as close as possible. Look for the dive. Okay, I'm gonna also write it down. Okay. Other things we can be looking at, how obviously, as we mentioned, the rest of the pressure, and we can see the surgeon why they receive a lot of the pressure after, because the Winston is not attacking and they tank all of that damage, so ideally Winston should be going in, but unfortunately they already did that before. That's why it will be difficult for you to do anything. And if you guys can be on the same page with what's going on, I think that's what's gonna be a great help. Are we diving to top? Are we waiting, stabilizing? Maybe we're just getting our resources back. I think it's always gonna be important. At this point, you guys have to just wait slightly and just reset. Let's see what's gonna happen later. And see, this is one more time, the engage in enclosed space, which is going to be really difficult to do, especially the fact given that all of our characters now more longer range oriented. We have a soldier, we have a surgeon. Surgeon can take advantage of their mobility and try to go up somewhere in the buildings, but this is going to be really tough for them to fight in here. Especially versus the Mave. The fact given, if you also guys able to ultra and know what kind of ultimates they have, it will be more difficult too. Yeah, there's kind of another layer we can always track and think. What are the best targets for us to dive in based on our resources or based on theirs? So what is the solution? Again, we can walk over here and try to think. What are more valuable targets? Well, maybe we can try to dive in there Zenyatta and try to force out Transcendence. We can even dive in Diana and force out Transcendence this way. Maybe fighting Hans is not too bad of an idea too, especially if they're gonna be positioned that high ground and slightly isolated. And all of that stuff together, it just gives you understanding how and when you're fighting. So it makes it easy. See, going in that tiny space when they have Dragon and when there is also Mei ultimate will be really difficult. Now there are some swaps. We swapping off from the dive. Let's just still pay attention to our resource management and how we are fighting space. Now for this composition, I think it's easier for you to take advantage of enclosed spaces, especially your front line. The tank and the Lucio can just try to push in and try to take advantage of their short range pressure, and then later on your longer range characters can follow up on what you're doing. You can just follow up with longer sidelines usually afterwards. So for example here we can just fight for this enclosed range space and then get your soldier over here, and the surgeon is going to set up around those angles as well and just establish pressure on the point. I think that's one of the best ways to play that, probably, because this high ground is so oppressive. We have the people on the right, we have the people on the left, so we have to somehow deal with that. I think another option could also be trying to force points. Somebody can go on a point like your brawl tanks, and maybe the Lucio can also stay with them, maybe Kiriko occasionally if that's needed, but the rest of your group can just try to go up there. So you'll have this two-group split, and this is going to be easier for you to fight. Now there's a Diva Bomb, a little bit unfortunate. We got picked off and just have to reset again. You still have 2 more fights at least. So let's see how that's going to go. Now, if we look at it from the same perspective what we talked about before, our big defensive resources should be used right when our pressure is about to happen, when it's ready. And the question is, when we're using Fortify, are those guys ready to peak that angle? Because the big problem is, when we are receiving pressure, is that those guys are actively shooting you and they getting your resources for us, but you only are getting healed. Your teammates are not able to take advantage of you dragging the attention and do any meaningful damage. Now that's always going to be so important when we're trying to walk in and as a tank, make sure the most of my team is able to follow up and do the actual pressure on anybody. Because now they're just draining resources, and some of the people might think, well, maybe in this case you can farm the ultimate, maybe you can just try to get your beat and Kiri ultimate, which is not too bad, yes, but at the same time, there's always going to be bigger emphasis on your pressure, because the damage output in this game is always higher compared to healing output. So we cannot perform any action, especially when the fight starts, ideally without going for the pressure first, and then only later thinking about how to resustain, how to heal everybody up. And see, now there's no defensive, and it's going to be difficult for you to walk forward when it matters, and that's why we can easily get punished by that wall. So 3-1 call can help you out. 3-1, let's speak that. Yeah, don't forget about the quality of the plan too. Maybe you can also try to have those different groups. Maybe you can have a character which can force point, maybe Tracer, maybe Sombra, if those plans doesn't work. Typically, dive should be okay for this map, but you guys have to really work on your synchronization when talking about the dive. Now, unfortunately, I don't think there's gonna be a lot happening because of just how much pressure is on you and the enemy. They also have, well, I think in this case, because they have an advantage, they're also gonna have better ult economy, right? Because your Rissa got picked off, and I don't think you can manage to capture the point easily, but that's okay. Okay, so I wouldn't focus on anything else way too much on any other macros. Let's just try to summarize. What we want is try to play around the big defensive resources. Make sure when the resource is used, the rest of your team can follow up. So resource is up. Team is pushing. Yeah, team is just able to do the pressure. Yeah, they're able to do pressure on somebody, not only heal. Okay. Well, ideally, when we're playing the dive, we want to get as close as possible. Look for the dive after. Yeah, just try to use the corners. It's usually verticality, and you can try to go on anybody afterwards. Anything else? Fighting for power positions. Well, just gotta try to use space where you can take advantage of mobility. You don't want to be using enclosed spaces. I really like a lot of times the approach, that just how you guys been fighting for the space over here for the high grounds. I see in your Surgeon, I see in your Ash trying to take angles, but synchronization together with using that space is so important. You cannot have successful dive without two variables together. Yeah, you need to just be in one space and fight together, sync the pressure, and make sure you're fighting for the right area. That's what I would start with. 3-1 call could also be big help for South Point. If it's difficult for you to break to the points like this as well, that can be big help. Have one group of people who can do that. It's not necessarily has to be big group, like even sending tank, but you can send some whatever more mobile character. Usually, more mobile or more defensive character is gonna do the best when trying to contest the point like this, when we're trying to force out the point and just make the other characters drop from this high ground over here, this high ground over there. So this way it will make it easy for you guys. I think that's it. If there are gonna be any questions, let me know. I will be glad to answer those. Bye bye everyone.